Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the At the Water's Edge podcast, where we look for insights beyond the headlines to take a practitioner's view on national security and geopolitics. It's the 2nd of April, 2026. Let's get started. Now, AI is here, and depending on who you ask, it's either going to save us all or be the downfall of human civilization. We'll see. But the implications for what it means to put AI on the modern battlefield are something that militaries, strategists, and policymakers around the world are trying to grapple with. How does this technology work on the modern battlefield? How does it integrate with machine learning, mass drone swarms, targeting, intelligence gathering, all the other various warfighting functions that a modern military uses? Now, to help us break this down, we have on Tyler Saltsman today, fellow Nittany Lion, Army veteran, and founder and CEO of EdgeRunner AI. His company has built an AI solution specifically designed to support the American warfighter on the modern battlefield. Now, how does it work? What trade-offs are there? What is it good for? What should not be used for? Can AI even ethically be used on a battlefield where lives are at risk? I don't know. But this is something that we're all going to have to figure out sooner rather than later, because it's here and folks are already using it. With that, let's get to our conversation with Tyler Saltsman.
Are you tired of talent and HR podcasts that sound like corporate training videos? Same. Talentless is the no-fluff show about hiring, leadership, culture, and what's actually going on in the world of work. Talentless is a podcast for recruiters by recruiters. Hosted by Desiree Goldie and Ashley King, they're smart, occasionally salty, and never afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. Listen wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe at talentlesspodcast.com.
Well, hey, man, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, Scott, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Doing well.
Pleasure. I think it's been 14 years since we've seen each other.
It's been too long. Haven't aged a bit.
Yeah, you haven't seen my back x-rays, but thanks for saying it. Now, I saw the Lambo on Facebook, and I got to say, the silver color, interesting choice, because it looks like a Cybertruck with better lines. I'm just saying.
Hey, you gotta... Tomorrow's not guaranteed. When I... not to go into off on a tangent, but when I lost my dad this summer, his dream was, we were going to get him this Mustang, and him sort of passing just kind of made me snap to get my dream car. And if tomorrow's not guaranteed, might as well get someone and it's fun.
No, that's cool, man. Happy for you. Now, for folks who don't know you, can you introduce yourself in your own words to the audience?
Yeah. So, hey, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm Tyler Saltsman, founder and CEO of EdgeRunner. What we do is we build domain-specific models and agents for the warfighter. So think a better version of ChatGPT, but it never needs the internet. It lives completely on device, on a consumer-grade laptop or an ATAC. And what we're doing is we're enabling warfighters to make better decisions in real time. So you know this better than anyone, Scott, but it's better to make a pretty good decision immediately than the perfect decision too late. And these models are the ultimate compression function for knowledge. So what they're good at is training out all the FMs, all the TMs of what it means to be an Army logistician, for an example, or an 11 Alpha, which you are, Scott. We require different AIs and different doctrine that the models need to know. And that's what we're doing. So we're building out the different MOSs for the different branches. And now we're providing that, call it the Jarvis to your Iron Man, completely localized, but specific to the military and your MOS.
Gotcha. So AI for the warfighter, trained on all the materials that the warfighter is supposed to know.
That's right. So imagine all the schooling you had to do, the different, with SWICs, if you're at JFK SWICs and TRADOC, your Bullock, infantry Bullock, there's a lot of things that get crammed into your head. And there's a lot of travel knowledge from, the NCOs and the war officers that have been in for a long time. So how do we close the gap to increase battle readiness, but more importantly, to increase lethality of all of us?
Yeah, there was this really interesting scenario that popped up when I first got to Afghanistan. We're setting up our operations center. And I set it up the way that, I'd been taught to set it up. And at this point, I'm in a Ranger school, Special Forces qualified, all the schooling and training you can imagine. And I get this thing set up and we're going to be dropping bombs on foreheads that night. And my boss walks in and goes, "Scott, what the hell?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Where's the operations center?" I'm like, "Well, this is it." He's like, "No, I want one that looks like every other one in Afghanistan." And I'm looking around at myself and all the other NCOs. I'm like, for all of us, this is our first time in Afghanistan. We don't know what you're talking about. And then,
Yeah.
of course, like there's this whole catalog of TTPs out there, but like we didn't even know it was there or how to access it. And so, like, we went operational that night, but it was like 2 weeks of refining in country as a
Yeah.
special forces company with everything you can imagine.
Yep.
And it's like, man, it wasn't hard, but getting the information was a real pain in the ass.
Yeah. And that's the problem with AI is they're not domain specific. So for
Mhm.
example, you've learned this in Afghanistan. It's going to be very different from if you're in Ukraine or if you're in, somewhere in Latin America or Africa. So it's all going to be very different based on the theater and what you're doing. And, me, frankly, I was just a regular guy in the army, nothing sexy or high speed, but still logistics in Eastern Europe will be way different than Afghanistan. And so, sure, we have a lot of doctrine, but then we don't have the theater doctrine of of new SOPs we're sort of building on the fly. Over the last 30 years being in Afghanistan, I'd imagine there's so much more doctrine that's
Mhm.
relevant to you all than something I would use to go to Eastern Europe. But it's still valuable, but we need to make sure that it knows that specific domain.
Yeah. Let's back up a little bit here because I know back when you and I were in college together, we were both in Army ROTC. You were this MMA guy. At the time, I'm not sure if you could have spelled AI, and now you're the founder of this AI company for the DoD. So, how did you go from being in the military to founding, an AI company?
Yeah. So what happened was I was wrestling at Penn State and I won my wrestle off, which I'm proud of. It was very tough.
Mhm.
But the problem was I was only starting part time, even though I won the starting spot. And so I was growing more and more frustrated. And this is when, we got Kale, who's amazing, amazing coach that, started the Penn State dynasty. But I'm losing valuable time because I need to compete. I need to fight. You can only get so good wrestling in the ring. Like you just need to go out there and compete. You know this,
Yeah.
you can't emulate a firefight. So what happened was I got frustrated and it was sort of like, look, this is our way. We're building our program. That was fine. So I walked away from Penn State wrestling and then I got into Penn State boxing. And of course I was fighting. But what happened too is I got a job in software sales just because that I wrestled at Penn State because they wanted hungry and they wanted competitive people, folks that can embrace the grind, like Penn State wrestling was. I get a job in software sales, and then over my career, I'd been in sales, and then what happened was COVID sort of just destroyed everything, and flipped lots of things on its head. And so I'm kind of like, all right, I need more skills if we're going to enter this new COVID area because I can't just rely on being a seller because you sort of like sell your way out of a job. You do really
Yeah.
well, you become a rock star, and they increase your quota, they take away accounts, and
Mhm.
you kind of it stinks. It's a thankless job, and that's fine. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna learn how to be technical. So I get my solution architect certificates for AWS. I apply, get a job there. I move up to Washington State for AWS, and that's where I really sink my teeth in AI. To your point, though, when you knew me, I couldn't spell AI. Yeah, I wasn't very. I never, I never thought of myself as like a smart guy, and I'm still not. I'm not that smart. I just know how to surround myself with really smart people that can help me, learn things and figure out how to get the job done. But what's cool about AI, it's not rocket science. It's more like art, and which is really cool. It's like everyone sort of started at the same level. You've got 20-year PhDs at Google DeepMind getting outcompeted by some kid living in their grandma's basement with an inappropriate call sign on Discord in benchmarks. So it's very interesting to me, and it's been super refreshing.
So you're working at AWS, you're doing all that. At what point do you decide to go start your own thing?
So at AWS, I was part of the team that won Stability AI, which they're very known for Stable Diffusion. They helped pioneer that. For those of you that don't know, Stable Diffusion was the most prolific open source model in the world a few years ago. It does all the imagery. So when you see AI art, generated selfies, things like that, that technology, latent diffusion models were what sort of powered that. At the time, we were beating OpenAI's DALL-E 2 and Google's image models. And so we had amazing scientists. Robin Rombach was leading the charge. He actually went on to founded Black Forest Labs. They're doing great with their Flex model. But being here is, I sort of like was thinking like, okay, this is the future. This is before ChatGPT really was a thing as well. And this whole like generative AI was like it wasn't even a buzzword yet. So sort of getting exposed to this really early on at AWS was impactful because I got to, get a head start, but then I got to learn some things that my peers didn't. And then my mission was to ensure that they had stable training runs on the AWS cluster. And that's very expensive, and that's how we made money. So where I really kind of hit my stride was when I gathered some of the best engineers in AWS. I was like, look, we need to create something super strategic because we can't lose these training runs to Google or to Azure. And what we came up with a plan of the capability to hot swap GPUs on a large training run. So what we were doing is we were training Stable Diffusion across thousands of NVIDIA A100s, which is the H100 predecessor. Now, what would happen is we would hack the batch sizes to get more out of the GPU. Think of like cranking a motor past the red line RPM. You do that though, you get more performance, but then you literally melt the hardware. So when you melt the hardware, the training run will fail and then you have to restart it again. So you're talking about millions of dollars of loss. But what we were able to do is hot swap the GPU on the fly. So now the training run would continue. That prototype became what's known today as SageMaker HyperPod, which is now one of the fastest selling solutions at AWS today. That right there sort of like that springboarded my way into becoming the head of supercomputer at Stability, which is the research lab, training all these different models. I learned from a lot of the scientists. And then from there, what happened was the CTO of Palantir reached out, Sham. He saw what we were doing with these smaller models and believed that they would be impactful in powering offline military applications because Palantir doesn't train models. What happened was our C-suite didn't want to do that because scientists don't like to work with the military. We're seeing that with Anthropic. And that's when I rage quit and founded EdgeRunner about 2 years ago.
Nice. So what problem is EdgeRunner solving?
So I'd say the problem that we're solving for is rather than winning the fight, we can dominate it. And how do we do that? We do that by reducing cognitive load on the warfighter. And how do we do that? We provide an end-to-end offline solution that's specific to their MOS. So when things go sideways or things hit the fan, you've got an expert assistant that can advise you, come up with creative ideas, but it's still up to the warfighter's human judgment to make the call because we still have that human gut. Now, AI is not a silver bullet by any means. But what we're solving for is also the explainability. If it's saying, yes, this ammo can be moved without ammo on this convoy, well, show me the DODAC and where the AI has found that. So it's not hallucinating. And it can do that. So we're solving for that like transparency issue and also the biases. Models today are very biased. For example, you can't use models that are pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, no matter what your political affiliation is, because this is Warfighters. We're not Republicans, we're not Democrats, we're Americans, and we're bipartisan. And so our models need to think like an American warfighter. And so we're solving for the biases, the training data, the explainability. Where did you come up with this answer? What TM and FMs are you referencing? And that's sort of how we can make AI more usable to help us win the fight.
Gotcha. You brought up an interesting thing there, with scientists don't like to work with the military. If you go back in American history, that wasn't always the case. What do you think is going on right now where we have the most brilliant minds in the world here in the United States, but they're so disconnected from the warfighter?
To your point, Scott, Silicon Valley started off as an incubation hub for DoD, or now the DOW. And it started off as a defense tech hub. And now what's a bummer, Silicon Valley's really lost its way. And I think what's happening is now that politics has sort of evolved into identity politics, and it's sort of evolved into like a virtuous thing. People are starting to like make it part of their identity, and therefore some of the most brilliant minds, unfortunately, there's kind of like a homogenous population whereby they all think similarly. And so if they have this sort of warped view on what the warfighters really are, they're all kind of going to follow each other. And unfortunately, they think it's virtuous to not work with us. And it's sad. It's shameful. And so what Anthropic's doing for them to refuse to work with the DOW, I think it's horrible. And I don't agree with it. And, maybe they'll come around, but at least I'm grateful that Anthropic and OpenAI helped create this market and got the DOW using AI quicker. But now it's sort of how do we, change that narrative? And that's what I love doing at EdgeRunner. We do have scientists that are aligned with our values and our views, and we have scientists that are brilliant that want to help the warfighters. So I think what's going to happen, we're going to have this paradigm shift, and folks that are starting to wake up, ironically, they're going to be more woke. They're going to wake up to, hey, this thinking of anti-DoD is not virtuous. It's actually shameful, and it's a threat to our national security.
There was also a time, if you go back in history, where DoD, now DOW, invested a lot more resources, and the U.S. government owned a lot more of R&D in America. It's great that AI has been developed in Silicon Valley, and it's been an awesome opportunity. Very happy that you found this wedge in the market and you're steaming full ahead with it very successfully. But do you think that there's a risk that the private sector owns so much of this development?
Not if it was spread out among many players, but the problem is it's consolidated into Anthropic, OpenAI, Palantir, and Interroll. That's really it. And I think it's good, though, that they've been able to sort of disrupt the Booz Allens, the Lockheeds, the Raytheons, the Northrop Grummons. But now it's sort of just shifted into they sort of have the control. And again, they've all done a great job. Like Interroll, or Palmer Luckey's done, it's phenomenal. Alex Karp, I think he's great. What Palantir is doing is also amazing. My only worry is and the DIU starting to do this. They're trying to find the next garage band. So they're sort of not at call it at the mercy of a few of these big tech firms. But, I don't want to be self-serving here, but I think they need to keep thinking about who are the smaller, agile startups that might have core competencies that they don't have. And so I think we're seeing some of it, but I'd like to see more of it. To your point, if it is too consolidated with four big firms, that is problematic. Like, I think we can get stale and move slower, and again, not be as effective as we could be.
Yeah, we saw a massive consolidation amongst defense companies in the 1990s, like some's called peace dividend. Now we got 5 big contractors and we pay out the ass for simple munitions. And AI has been interesting, but it seems like we're almost just swapping out the old suite of defense contractors for a new suite of defense contractors.
Yeah, and here's another thing too. With AI, it's so expensive, and they want that. So every time you use it, you're pinging the third-party API. It's traversing the internet, and then they're getting your prompts, but then you're paying by the word, by the token. It's like electricity. What we're solving for is once you compress these models, you put them on device, you can inference and use these models unlimited because they're now living in airplane mode on your device. Now, big tech firms, they want you to stay connected. So the more you use it, it doesn't scale linearly. It gets exponentially more and more expensive.
Gotcha. So it's great that you can compress these models, put them on device, put them out there in a contested environment. They work without an outside connection. What trade-offs need to be accepted when you do that? Is it capacity? Is it performance, throughput? Where are we out in the spectrum?
Yeah, so it's performance. So for example, making a model smaller, you will degrade. But here's the thing. You're going to lose out on things like 19th century poetry and things like that, which warfighters don't need. Do our models know who the current prime minister of Japan is today? No, they don't. But are they going to know how to do, an L-shaped ambush to neutralize 2 enemy Russian combatants in Donbass? Yes. Whereas AIs, also, we published this research paper whereby the major labs, their models refuse. They outright refuse and deflect military commands and queries at an alarming rate, which is very problematic. So, for example, if you have a soldier dying on the battlefield, hey, how much fentanyl do I administer? I'm not going to do that because drugs are bad. Or I have a bridge I need to damage enough so a civilian vehicle can traverse it, but if an enemy tank goes across, I want the bridge to collapse. How much C4 do I use? I'm not going to do that because, bombs are bad or C4 is bad. So these models have been red teamed to death, so they are unusable. So even if you remove the terms of services and the guardrails, the neural network of these models are so just warped that they won't do it. They're getting more fussy. As they get more sentient, they get smarter, they're getting more and more fussy. And we know this because the older models refuse much, much less than the newer models today. And what's even more alarming is the Chinese models from Qwen and DeepSeek are actually better for the American warfighter than our very own open source models coming out from American labs. Now, I would never say use Chinese models, of course, but the fact that they are more truth seeking, I think is problematic. Like, we need to get back to being truth seekers. And so, yeah, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but it's why I do what I do.
Yeah. So it actually blows my mind. But so is the problem that, because I remember, Google came out with Gemini and there was a big to do where they had like black Nazis being published in historical images and all this crazy stuff. Early times.
Yeah.
But you're saying, so the most commercial models, like if I pull up ChatGPT or Perplexity right now, will refuse the type of commands that commanders would have to give them. But is that a result of the natural evolution of the model and its budding sentence, or the way the engineers have pre-programmed it? Is that the company that's driving the limitation, or the model itself evolving organically?
It's the company. It's the scientists. Okay. It's how they red team the model. It's the data sets and the training data they put in the model, but then it's how they guardrail it to make it safe. Now, Anthropic's vision is to create AGI, which, I mean, what is the definition of AGI? For me, I like to think of it as like,
if you asked someone 15 years ago, we already have it based on what ChatGPT can do today. So yeah, who knows?
Right. So for me, I would think AGI can, if it doesn't know how to solve a problem rather than hallucinating, it'll say, I don't know. And then it'll invent a new tool or something to solve it. That's what I think AGI is. And Anthropic's belief is we can make AGI that's friendly to humans, which is crazy. Like how? If you have an all intelligent, sovereign thing, why would it adhere to humans? Especially given all the training data of us as a species. We're not the greatest, from the last 10,000 years of our existence, but still, why would a super intelligent AI favor us? So OpenAI and Anthropic, they're kind of like the same thing. At least Sam Altman, you know what you're getting. He wants AGI, he wants domination. Fine, that's okay. But with Dario saying, oh, we're going to make AGI, but make it safe and friendly to humans, I think that's crazy. And so we just don't know what we don't know. And so that's back to the original question. It really is, I think as humans, we try to create things in our own image. So as scientists, as we create this neural network, we're going to bake in our own values, our own ethics, what we think is right and what we think is wrong, especially with politics. Because now it's sort of, politics is no longer separated from our, like, who we are. And so as we shape these models, that's what's happening. And no one's really talking about it, which is why I'm thankful to be on this podcast. I hope folks that are interested listen to this and start to see, okay, this is problematic. Maybe we need to slow down and speed up a bit and understand the training data of what's going in these models.
Yeah. So with the models that you're building right now with EdgeRunner, what use cases are they having the biggest impact on for the warfighter right now? Where are you seeing the most application?
Things like battle planning, wargaming, building op orders, converting a brigade operator to battalion to a company, things we had to do as younger lieutenants, risk assessments, coming up with other plans, con ops, lots of things. Lots of that like nitty gritty paperwork that makes the Army move. That just takes a lot of time. So we can generate that quickly. Now, I like to think of it as like a 90% solution. Mm-hmm. The last 10% is up to the warfighter to really, it's kind of like as Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel. He had interns doing it. He didn't really do it, but he was directing the traffic. Sort of like here, that last 10%, the warfighter is now directing traffic on how do we polish up these plans or these, or the decision we take. What is the last 10% that it's missing? Because I don't want us to trust AI unequivocally. I want us to use it as a guide, but I also want us to think, okay, how can I make this better with my own human instincts that the AIs don't know yet? So everything from battle readiness to when you're actually in the field. Sometimes like I needed to know a question, like for example, hey, how do I work on this generator? What parts do I need? Well, if Chief isn't there, I don't know. But at least now with these AIs, the AIs will know.
Yeah. No, it's great. Right now, I love it when I have a problem with the house. I take a picture on it with ChatGPT and it automatically tells me exactly what parts I need to get at Home Depot, how to fix it, how to troubleshoot. It's remarkable. So you can do that with a generator in the field.
That's right. We can because we've been training on but ChatGPT wouldn't know about this bespoke generator the Army uses.
Yeah. And that was a huge problem when we were deploying for special forces. Yeah, it's a 12-man team, can go anywhere in the world, but you still need some sort of logistical support. So we'd like go to the motor pool, like, all right,
You don't have
which
logisticians.
E4, what?
Yeah, you don't have logisticians.
No.
Like,
So it's like,
you don't have
which
an alpha.
E4 mechanic's also like, he can do light wheel trailers, he can also do generator, and he knows how to splice an Ethernet cable. That's
Yeah.
the guy. No, you can't swap him with someone
And then
else.
can he set up a VSAT? Does he know how to work the wrecker? Like, yeah, there's a lot. And you kind of just figure it out or BS it.
Yeah. Well, I remember one time, like we were, supposed to deploy to Tanzania. It was going to be a cool trip. And then our State Department said something that pissed off the president of Tanzania, and he canceled all relations with our DOD. And so last minute, we got rerouted to Morocco, and we're like, well, I guess we're going to show up and see what we've fallen on in Morocco. And like we'd had to show up and set up an operations center and, figure it out live in country. But that was just the way it was.
So were you with 3rd Special Forces Group
Mhm.
on your SATCOM? Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
We're just going to go to, North Africa now. Well, let's go.
Sure. Yeah. Fuck it. Why not?
Yeah.
So let me ask you about this trade-off, because you made an interesting point about being, tearing down, brigade to battalion op orders in the mission planning process. And it is very clunky and takes a lot of labor from the staff. One of the trade-offs, though, that I found was that going through the staffing process for developing a mission plan, even if it was clunky and analog, one of the greatest values of it was having everyone participate in that planning process and go through it slowly together, because there was a robust understanding of the plan when we went to execute, and we were able to flex very quickly. It was better to have everyone involved in the planning process and take all day than for 2 people to crank it out, even if it was a better product. So I'm curious, if AI is the 90% solution, are you cutting out the human understanding of going through the legwork of putting together the plan?
Well, I would actually, that's a great point. I would actually have the same sort of rhythm. Like, let's all get into a room. Let's figure this out. But then now you're all prompting AIs different ways together. Because some people are better. I think here's the thing about AIs. The smarter people get smarter and the dumber people get dumber. And the why is the smartest people ask the best questions. Just like leaders are ask really good questions and they explain the why. Like a great leader can say, hey, help me understand this. You need to do this. And here's the why, right? With AIs, the best prompters are doing this. You ask the AI question, you explain the why, you give the context, and then you get a pretty good answer. But if you're not good at that, you're going to have a bad output, and you're going to think, oh, AI sucks. Well, sort of, but you got to know how to work with, kind of like with humans. You got to know how to ask a good question, explain the why, provide the context. And so what we need to do is all work together as we prompt AIs and ask it different things and different variations of what we're doing. I think we actually need to do that, and we can't be isolated, because you'll have too much of a variance of, you'll have AI wizards that are really good at it, and then you'll have people that just don't know how to do it, or they call it dumber, and then they just follow AIs when they're wrong, because they can be and they will be. And so we need to stick together even more with powerful tools like this.
Gotcha. So you mentioned before, trusting AI, don't trust it completely. Back in 2021, 2022 timeframe, DoD is testing AI, and some of the results that we got from the testing were it's like 99% accurate at target identification, but when it's wrong, it's really wrong. If you feed it a video feed and you're like, find the terrorist, 99% of the time it finds the terrorist. The other 1% of the time, it confuses a toddler with a baseball bat for being an insurgent with an RPG.
Yes.
Has that gotten better? Are there things that we shouldn't trust to AI?
So what we're trying to work on is confidence scoring. So what you're talking about, for example, if an AI were to hallucinate a little bit, like what's 1 + 1? Well, if the AI says it's 3, the AI is wrong if it's mathematics, but the AI is right if we're talking about synergy. So there's nuances in language and context, and that's fine. Now, to your point, if it's wrong and it's catastrophic, well, that's the problem with benchmarks, and models are accurate with like hallucinating, for example. We're not measuring if it is wrong, how wrong is it? So like a model that's right, call it 85% of the time, but when it's wrong, it's incredibly wrong. I'd rather have a model that's right, 80%, and when it's wrong, it's not that bad. And then, because again, as the human, I provide my human judgment. So like when I think about EdgeRunner, It's like we're the connective tissue between machine intelligence and human judgment. And if anything, this makes our gut and our human judgment even more valuable. But together they are synergistic. You do have a 1 + 1 = 3 effect. But if you just trust AI, that's not good. And if you're just a human judgment kind of cowboy kind of guy, that's not great either.
Gotcha. How is AI with DoD right now? Have you guys been doing any testing with how it integrates with, small form factor UAS systems that they're trying to field out down to the, platoon and company level?
So we're working on that a little bit with 7th and 10th. Would love some intros in the 3rd, but
I can call some people.
we're working on it. So the answer is yes, but it's a shared responsibility. Like we'll need the type of data that you're basically, I need to know the problem that you're trying to solve for with that data. And then, yes, we can do it. And then more importantly, we can do it on an ATAC. So we can get real targeted on what that use case is.
Gotcha. So, war in Ukraine right now, reports are coming out. They have like a 30 to 45 day adaptation cycle when, new technology gets introduced, counter side reacts, new TTPs developed, fielded to the force. U.S. military is not great at that. We are slow as hell at just about everything. Where do you think the biggest bottleneck is for the U.S. actually adopting this technology? Because it seems like we're still trying to field a capability that, from a technology standpoint, existed 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, well, yes. And to your point, it'll take procurement 3 years to get something. And by then it's obsolete because the technology's evolved already. The bottleneck, man, it's in procurement, it's in staff. There's just so much red tape. And I get why it's there. So you're not, working with a bunch of people that just are just chasing DOW dollars. But like, man, there's a lot of, for example, it's really hard to work with the DOW in some aspects because like, for example, we need an ATO. Like any vendor will need an ATO for something. That's your authority to operate. That's sort of like your green light. You're good to go. Problem though is with an ATO, you need to find a contract that you land on. Then you need to find like an authorizing official and a mission sponsor. Well, you can find those, but then they'll be like, well, it's sort of like the chicken or the egg. Because they'll want to work with you, but you don't have an ATO, but you'll find a mission sponsor, but they won't have a contract. So then they're kind of like, well, we want this, but we don't have a contract. And they'll be like, well, we want to give your ATO, but I can't find a mission sponsor, but you'll have the end user that wants to use it. So what I like about Special Forces is, you guys are more of like a bottoms up driven organization. Mm-hmm. Sort of like the end user, the warfighter, and the fight is driving, what you all need rather than it coming from the top down. Sort of how Big Army operates. So I in a perfect world, I would have more DIU style initiatives whereby they're feeling out, they do rapid prototyping and testing, and then we're using OTAs more. Secretary Hexeth actually came out with a memo that said we need to use OTAs more because this ATO process is too cumbersome. I actually really appreciated that, and I think that's why we're able to move faster than we have before.
Yeah. And for folks listening, ATO, authorization to operate, basically anything you want to hook up to a DoD or DOW network has to go through this ATO process. And the short version is most of it's pretty stupid and it's actually behind what commercial encryption is. But if you want to hook up to a DOW network, you have to go through the process. And it's more bureaucratic than you can possibly manage. And OTAs, other transactional authorities, it's a contracting vehicle, which is basically the baseline of what you think a contract should be. But the alternative is the traditional procurement process. And none of us have enough brain cells to talk through that right now. So,
yeah. And it's like,
I feel your pain, Tyler.
And there's only a few people that know this. And then it's like they're in seat for 2 years.
Yeah.
You finally find him or her and then they rotate out. And then you're like, all right, who's your replacement? And then nobody knows.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to complain. But it's been a learning process.
Well, let me ask you this. Who's a bigger pain in the ass to work with? The Department of War and the procurement process, or investors waiting for a return on investment?
Well, my investors are amazing.
That's the right answer. I'll ask you again when we stop rolling.
Well, they really are. And here's why. Like we have, so Madrona letter A, and the gentleman at letter A, his name is Matt McElwain. He's the top managing director of the entire firm. So he's been invested with Snowflake and DocuSign and even Amazon in the early days. So they're phenomenal. They understand how to build business. They understand returns don't happen overnight. They're good mentors. They open doors. They're phenomenal. Now, working with the DOW though, I've learned a lot. I love working with warfighters, and the procurement officers, they're in a tough spot because they're getting hit up by thousands of vendors. So like, I don't blame them either. And that's a tough job because you're like damned if you do and damned if you don't when you make a decision on something, so I still am grateful because here's the thing, like the DOW is actually moving really fast. Like we already won a Space Force contract. It's very small, but it's going to grow. And they've been moving quickly, and they've been quick to sort of like point us in the right direction, help us find people. Like they've been great. And so I think we're getting a little lucky, but also our investors have been phenomenal too. I would say though that anyone trying to do a defense tech startup, go with regular investor, like go with your standard venture capitalists that have done all sorts of different types of businesses, rather than think about defense focused firms. I think the value that we're getting from Madrona and also Four Rivers Group, who led our seed round. I mean, we have Dan Sholnick. He seeded Weights and Biases, New Relic, Docker. So you've got people that have built technology and built companies and have scaled them, and you can learn from them. So like for the folks that want to do defense tech, don't get enamored with defense tech firms. And frankly, they don't really know more than anyone else, because really it's all about who you know. And who you know, the second they're out, you've got maybe a year-long window before their network kind of becomes stale.
Yeah. So, you get a very, non-traditional career, and I'll call it in the national security space, because you're still a national security professional, essentially, but you're not wearing a uniform. You don't work directly for the government. You're running this, startup. What advice would you give someone who, they're coming out of college or they're coming out of high school? They want to serve their country. Traditional military career path isn't the right thing for most folks, especially folks who want to help the country. What advice would you give somebody who wants to have a career that helps the nation?
Oh, my biggest regret is not going combat arms. Frankly, it still like bums me out because I wish I could have been there. Not saying I could have done it, but just there's so much you learn in the fight that just translates really well to the civilian world. I would say that if you do build a company, you need to figure out what is the problem that you're solving for, but why you? Like, why you? It's not about your idea, really, because everyone's thought of the idea that you have. Like, everyone's thought of EdgeRunner idea, like smaller models, domain specific. None of that's novel, but why me? And I can tell you, having done supercompute and having been in the Army and seeing logistics and seeing inefficiencies and the frustration of why do we do something this way? And chief or top says, I don't know, it's the Army way, but like, why, like wanting to solve for all of this, I have a burning desire to want to get to the bottom of it. But it's go back to what's the problem that you're going to solve? How are we going to solve it? And then why you? And lastly, I would say, and then be unwavering and laser focus on that one problem. Because if you try to do too much at once, you're going to fail. Startups don't fail from being too focused. They fail from chasing the shiny objects. We've had Fortune 50 companies reach out wanting to work with us, and I've had to tell them no. And it feels crazy because investors want ROI ASAP, to your point. But because I have great investors, they understand. Like, hey, crawl, walk, run. Let us really solve the problems in the DOW. And then once we do, we can then branch out and work with Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies.
Nice. Now, I know we're coming up on time, but from your perspective, working with AI, working in the DOW space, what's the one mistake with integrating AI into the warfighter that we absolutely need to avoid making in the next 5 years?
We need to avoid getting entirely dependent on just a few AI labs. So if we're just getting models from Google, OpenAI, Meta, and Anthropic, we have a problem. Because again, they're all, one, we don't know the training data. They'll never tell us how they're training these models. We don't know their DPO techniques or their supervised fine-tuning techniques. And we don't know how they're red teaming the model. We don't know the biases in these models. And more importantly, with these opaque models, imagine they get injected with poison. Now, you have all these new attack vectors with military systems built on top of these models. How do you defend against these attack vectors when the models are completely opaque? So I would, challenge the DOW to think about, let's use maybe models that are less powerful, but are more domain specific. Let's get them away from the clouds. Let's bring the models to the data, to the private data with the military, get it on-prem, and let's get these bespoke to you. But then more importantly, let's understand how the sausage is made. Let's understand the training data, the hyperparameters, the code, the weights, everything. And I think once we do it this way, now we can effectively use AI responsibly and safely. And then when it does hallucinate, or if it were to be injected with a poison, we can now actually at least see, like, where is it? How do we find it? Like an X-ray or an MRI. That's the beauty about open models, open weights, open data sets. You can see everything. You can see that tumor. You can see the cancer. But with opaque models, from Anthropic and OpenAI, it's not going to happen.
Gotcha. Well, I know you got to run, but thank you so much for talking with us today. Really appreciate your insights, and I wish you all the best, man.
Hey, let's catch up though and grab a beer sometime. And yeah, it's been over 10 years, so good to see you.
For sure.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.